All right, so Palantir, right? I mean, their market cap, it just went zoom right past Lockheed Martin's.
Yeah,
Which is kind of a big deal when you think about it.
it is a big deal.
I mean, it's a software company, right? An AI company
Yeah.
that is now considered more valuable than like this titan of military hardware.
Yeah. I mean, and that's really what makes it so fascinating.
So what's going on here?
This idea of, Palantir, they've really kind of been strategically targeting this gap in the defense industry.
Okay.
And that gap is modern software solutions, and specifically AI. Right?
That makes sense, right? Because the U.S. government wants to maintain its edge, wants to be ahead
Absolutely. And
of the curve.
And they're willing to spend to do it.
Technologically.
Big time.
And that leads to some pretty big contracts for companies that can deliver.
Huge contracts.
Which is what Palantir's doing.
That's right.
But, okay, so we've got the defense angle. But this Motley Fool article that we're diving into today, it makes this really interesting point that Palantir isn't just about fighter jets and satellites anymore.
No.
They're making a serious push into the corporate world.
They are, yeah.
Right.
And what I think is so interesting about this is that they are taking this expertise that they've developed in data analytics and AI
Okay.
and applying it to solve problems for large corporations.
Oh, so like think
Exactly.
Fortune 500.
Yeah.
Companies with mountains of data that need to be made sense of.
That's where Palantir steps in.
And they're seeing some pretty impressive results from it, too.
Yeah.
I mean, their Q3 revenue was up 30% year over year, totaling $726 million.
Wow.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
U.S. commercial revenue grew even faster, a whopping 54%, to reach $179 million.
So it's not just government contracts driving this growth.
Not just government contracts driving this growth.
It's a really good point, and I think even more compelling than the revenue growth is their customer acquisition rate, which jumped 39% year over year in Q3.
Wow.
Now, they might only have 629 customers total, but remember, Palantir isn't going after your average small business.
Right. Each of these customers is a major player.
Exactly.
And they're likely demanding complex, custom-built solutions.
Yeah.
So even though the customer count may seem low, the potential for each of these customers is huge, enormous.
And I think that's really what signals sustained revenue growth down the line, and that's what gets investors excited.
Yeah, of course, rapid growth doesn't always equal a good investment.
You got it.
We have to consider the price tag right.
For sure.
As Warren Buffett famously said, it's far better to buy a wonderful company at a fair price than a fair company at a wonderful price.
100%.
So we need to think about what we're paying for that growth.
Right.
And when it comes to Palantir, their stock price has been
on a tear.
Really on a tear.
Yeah.
So the question is it getting ahead of itself? Well, the good news is that despite this really rapid expansion, Palantir's profit margins are still strong.
Yeah, that's true.
They reported a 20% GAAP net income margin in Q3, which is impressive.
It's great.
So they're not just growing, they're growing profitably.
Which means they're doing something right.
Exactly.
But to really understand if the stock is a good buy, we really need to dig deeper into these future projections.
Okay.
And really sort of weigh the potential risks. So the Motley Fool article, it paints this pretty optimistic picture, suggesting that Palantir's revenue could hit like a staggering $10 billion.
$10 billion?
Within the next 5 years.
Whoa, that's assuming that they can keep up this incredible pace.
Right.
What's driving that projection?
So it's based on kind of a couple of things.
Okay.
First, there's this continued growth in defense spending worldwide, right? I mean, governments are increasingly recognizing just how important data and AI are in modern warfare.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And second, Palantir is successfully tapping into this growing need for these types of solutions in the corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
Companies are drowning in data, right?
Yeah.
And they need sophisticated tools to be able to make sense of it all.
Totally. And the article also predicts that their net margins could expand to 30%.
No, higher.
Or even higher.
Yeah.
As revenue growth eventually slows.
Right.
Which seems reasonable given their software-centric business model.
Exactly.
You have high upfront costs, but relatively low cost to deliver the service once it's built.
Precisely.
So as they scale, those fixed costs get spread out over a larger revenue base, and boom, you've got wider profit margins.
Exactly. But here's the catch.
Okay.
And it's a big one. Even with these very optimistic projections, Palantir stock would still be trading at a pretty hefty price-to-earnings ratio.
Okay.
Or PE of 45 in 5 years.
So even if they achieve those very ambitious goals, the stock might already be priced for perfection.
That's right.
Investors might be paying a premium for future growth today.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a gamble that, some might be willing to take, but it's important to understand the dynamics at play.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, the market is clearly very excited about Palantir's potential.
Oh, yeah.
But it's crucial to remember that the price you pay for a stock matters.
Yes.
Even a fantastic business can be a bad investment if you overpay for it.
100%. And just to be clear, we're not giving financial advice here.
Of course.
But we are trying to equip you with the knowledge to make your own informed decisions.
Exactly. Okay, so on the one hand, you have this company with really impressive technology, strong growth in both the government and commercial sectors, and healthy profit margins.
Right.
But on the other hand,
Yeah.
the stock price is baking in a lot of that future success.
It is.
So a tough call for investors.
It is a tough call, and it raises, I think, a broader question about Palantir's long-term strategy.
Okay.
They've done an incredible job at establishing themselves in the defense industry.
Right.
But can they replicate that success in the corporate world?
That's a great question. I mean, the defense market is relatively concentrated with a handful of major players.
Exactly.
But the corporate world is vast and fragmented.
Very much so.
So Palantir is going to need to prove that they can navigate that landscape effectively and compete with these established tech giants.
100%, right? I mean, and there are other potential risks to consider.
Well, like what?
Well, for example, Palantir's software often deals with highly sensitive data,
Right.
which makes them a target for cyber attacks.
Oh, yeah.
And then their reliance on government contracts could become a vulnerability if political winds shift.
Those are all really important points.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just look at the financials we have to consider the bigger picture.
Absolutely.
And understand the potential downsides as well.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to remember that technology is constantly evolving, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what seems cutting edge today could be outdated tomorrow. So Palantir needs to stay ahead of the curve.
For sure.
And continue to innovate if they want to maintain their competitive advantage.
It's a high-stakes game for sure.
It is.
So where does this leave us? We've got a company with a lot of potential, but also some pretty significant risks.
Right.
The stock price is high, but maybe justified given their growth trajectory.
Right.
What should our listener take away from all of this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that investing is never black and white.
Yeah.
There's always this balance between risk and reward.
Right.
And I think Palantir is a fascinating case study in this regard.
Okay.
They've achieved remarkable success in a short amount of time,
Yeah.
but their future is far from certain.
And as we always say, don't just take our word for it.
Please.
Do your own research.
Yes.
Understand the company. Understand the industry. Understand the risks and the potential. And only then can you make an informed decision about whether or not an investment is right for you.
Well said. Investing is about more than just picking stocks.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the forces shaping the world and aligning your portfolio with your long-term goals.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about Palantir's remarkable growth, their push into the corporate world, their financial performance, and their sky-high stock valuation.
We have.
We've also touched on some of the potential risks that they face. But before we wrap things up, I want to shift gears for a moment.
Okay.
And talk about something that often gets overlooked in these conversations.
Okay.
The human element.
Yes. It's easy to get caught up in the numbers and the algorithms, but ultimately it's people who drive innovation.
Yeah.
It's the engineers, the data scientists, the product managers.
It's the people.
Who are building these incredible tools and solving these really complex problems.
And in Palantir's case, they've assembled a team of some of the brightest minds in the world.
They have.
These are people who are passionate about using data to make a difference.
Yeah.
Whether it's helping governments fight terrorism or helping businesses make better decisions.
And that's something I find really inspiring about Palantir. They're not just building software. They're building a culture of innovation and impact.
I like that.
They're attracting top talent and giving them the freedom to really push the boundaries of what's possible.
So as we marvel at these technological advancements and the financial milestones, let's not forget the human stories that underpin it all.
Yeah.
It's the people behind the scenes who are making it happen.
Well said. It's a good reminder that even in a world that is, increasingly dominated by technology, it's the human spirit that ultimately drives progress.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today. We explored Palantir's rise, their financials, their stock valuation, and the human element behind their success.
Oh, I have.
But before we wrap things up, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question. Knowing what we now know about Palantir, their business, their growth prospects, and their current valuation, what are the key factors you would consider before investing in their stock?
Well, that's a great question, and there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Right.
You know, it really depends on your individual risk tolerance, your investment timeline, and your overall financial goals. But I think there are a few key things to keep in mind.
All right, let's break those down.
Yeah.
What stands out to you as like the most important consideration?
I think first and foremost, I'd want to have a really clear understanding of Palantir's competitive landscape.
Okay.
You know, they've carved out this really interesting niche for themselves in the defense industry.
Right.
But the corporate world is a different beast.
Totally.
They're going up against some very large and well-established players.
You're talking about like the Microsofts and the Amazons of the world?
Exactly. Companies with vast resources and a proven track record in enterprise software.
For sure. So I'd want to dig deeper into how Palantir plans to differentiate themselves in this really crowded market.
Yeah.
What makes their solutions unique?
Right.
How are they going to win over customers who already have these established relationships with other providers?
It's a great point. And beyond just the competitive landscape, I'd be paying close attention to their customer acquisition strategy. You know, as we discussed, they've been very successful in landing these large, high-value customers.
Right.
But can they sustain that momentum?
Right. Can they scale those sales and marketing efforts to reach a broader audience?
Exactly, because attracting those big fish is one thing, but building a sustainable pipeline of new customers is absolutely essential for long-term growth.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there's the valuation question.
Right.
We talked about how Palantir's stock price is already baking in a lot of future growth.
It is.
So I'd be asking myself, does the potential reward justify the risk?
Yeah, it all comes back to that balance, right?
Yeah.
Weighing the potential upside against the possibility that things might not go as planned.
Exactly. Investing always involves a degree of uncertainty.
Always.
So the key is to understand those uncertainties.
Right.
Assess the potential downside and make sure you're comfortable with the level of risk.
I think that's well said.
So for our listener out there who might be considering adding Palantir to their portfolio, what's the main takeaway here?
I'd say the main takeaway is this: Palantir is a fascinating company with a lot of potential, but they're also operating in a very complex and competitive environment.
Yeah.
Don't let the hype cloud your judgment.
Right.
Do your research, understand the risks as well as the rewards, and make an informed decision that aligns with your investment goals.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
And remember, as always, we are not giving financial advice.
We are not.
This deep dive is simply meant to provide you with the information and insights you need to make your own informed decisions.
Absolutely. Investing is a personal journey. The key is to be informed, stay curious, and never stop learning.
All right. That brings us to the end of our deep dive into Palantir. Hopefully you found this exploration insightful and thought-provoking.
Until next time, happy investing.